All right, everyone. Hopefully that caught everyone's attention because that was pretty loud. All right. So we are at 2:01 and we are going to call to order the May 21st regular board meeting of North County Transit. Before we begin, members of the public who may be viewing the meeting on NCTD's YouTube page, please note that in order to make a public comment during the meeting, you must connect to the meeting using the Zoom link provided on the agenda. In addition, you must also register by sending an email containing your name or phone number and the agenda item on which you wish to speak to clerk@nctd.org. I'll go ahead and ask the clerk of the board, Ms. Rodriguez, to take a verbal roll call for attendance.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair Bapatel,
Here.
Vice Chair Sanella,
Here.
Board Alternate Spilic,
Here.
Board Member O'Hara,
Present.
Board Member Garcia,
Here.
Board Member Joyce,
Present.
Board Member Desmond, Board Member Edson,
Present.
Board Member Contreras,
Present.
Board Member Lee. This completes the roll with Board Member Lee absent.
Thank you. Board Member Spellet, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Rodriguez will now provide a safety brief and review evacuation procedures.
In case of an emergency, I will dial 911. In case of evacuation, please take the stairs. Do not use the elevator. Once cleared of the building, do not re-enter unless cleared to do so by emergency personnel. There are fire extinguishers and first aid kits on each floor of this building. There is a portable defibrillator on the first and third floor of the building, and staff trained on CPR procedures if needed. This concludes my safety brief.
Thank you. And may I ask if there are any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair, there was information item number 12 that was related to Senate Bill 1098 was removed from the agenda and deferred to a future board meeting. A revised agenda was sent to the board and updated on our website.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to public communications. Do we have any general public comments today?
No, Madam Chair.
All right, at this time, public registration to provide general public comment will end. Before we proceed, I have a couple of quick protocol items to share. I will ask board members to please hold your comments and questions until after each agenda item has been presented. When the time comes for board member questions or comments, please raise your hand and wait until you are called upon to speak. Please turn on and speak into your microphone when it is your turn to speak. This will ensure that your comments are being heard by those listening to the meeting online. And lastly, when it is time to vote, Ms. Rodriguez will call a verbal vote. So moving on to the first item, which is the approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes for the regular board meeting of April 16th, 2026?
So moved, Edson.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Edson, seconded by O'Hara. If we could please call the vote.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? On the motion of Board Member Edson, seconded by Board Member O'Hara, to approve the minutes for the regular board meeting held on April 15, 2026. Motion passes.
Great, thank you. We are now moving on to the consent agenda for action today, and there are 10 items. Do we have any members of the public registered to speak on consent or requested that any item be pulled?
No, Madam Chair.
All right, at this time, we are ending the public registration to speak on consent items. Do any board members wish to pull any items from consent? All right, seeing none, we will go ahead and ask for a motion to approve consent items 1 through 10.
Second.
All right, motion by Desmond, seconded by Sanella.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? On the motion of Board Member Desmond, seconded by Vice Chair Sanella, to approve consent items 1 through 10, motion passes.
Thank you. All right, so moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is informational. Staff will provide an overview of the newly created Transit Operations Performance Report Dashboard. The purpose is to make NCTD's operational performance accessible and transparent to the board, riders, and the public. Courtney Nichols, Manager of Business Intelligence, will present this item, and we'll go ahead and pass it off to you all.
Me again. I'm going to introduce the item and then I'll pass it off to Courtney to do the meat of the presentation. As Sean has mentioned in his CEO reports to the board, NCTD stood up a business intelligence department last year to better inform decision-making across the district and improve visibility and transparency into key operating statistics. A key initiative of the BI department has been creating a public dashboard of performance metrics like ridership and on-time performance, which the board has traditionally received in the form of monthly reports on the consent agenda of each board meeting. Courtney Nichols, NCTD's Manager of Business Intelligence, who's incredibly talented, will provide an overview of the BI department, followed by a demo of the Transit Operations Performance Report, which is now live on the NCTD website.
Thank you, Mary. Good afternoon. As Mary mentioned, the Business Intelligence Department is a fairly new department here at NCTD. It was developed in March of 2025. And basically today, my goal is to go over the dashboard with you guys. But before we start, I kind of want to give some of our key objectives here. The first being KPI governance. NCTD has 5 North Star objectives that we have set for the agency. Our goals are to ensure that we have measurable and consistent KPIs tied to these, so leadership is able to ensure how the agency is performing against what we've set. Dashboard development, which is what we will demo today. Our job is to replace our manual reporting processes with scalable dashboards that are faster and more reliable and available on demand. The third point is streamlined data access. So across the agency, we have various sets of operational data, and our job is to bring the various data together into a centralized place so that all of the agency is working from a single source of truth. Key performance indicator. So the key purpose today is basically to show you guys the dashboard we have developed for you all. So the topper dashboard is our first major deliverable and a good example of the kind of transformations we're here to make. So before, the topper was produced monthly each month and produced into the board packets. This involves staff manually pulling data from multiple systems, consolidating the information, and producing the topper report. This offered a single snapshot into our current performance for the month with high-level summaries. Now, that same report is an interactive dashboard. This will be available on the website for the board and the public to view. This dashboard highlights ridership and on-time performance and offers new features with more granularity than you guys have previously seen in our board packets. Today, I will be giving a demo of the dashboard. So I'll kind of start out with going over how the dashboard works, how to navigate through the pages, and then we'll take a look at the current month performance, which is similar to what was in the board packet, but we've just streamlined into a dashboard. And then we'll get into the new features, which is the historical trends. So we have a rolling 5-year window of our last completed fiscal year's ridership information, and then we'll preview some of the mode page details. So each of our modes, we have different pages for each one of them, so you can get into more granularity of the ridership and on-time performance details. So with that, we'll get into the demo. Sorry about that. Okay, so as you see here, this is our website. So we are adding a new page that will have our performance metrics on it. So this is our new dashboard.
Could you just tell us where somebody would find that in the drop-down?
Yeah, so we're actually going to be putting a button on the main page that will be called performance metrics that you'll click on and it will automatically take you to the page. So this is our overview page. So I'll kind of give context of how everything works and then we'll kind of navigate through the pages. So in the bottom left-hand corner, we have these info panels. So the info panels kind of just give context into each of the pages, how the data refreshes will work. So how we currently have it set up is monthly. This will update by the 20th of each month. So as of today, as of yesterday, this dashboard reflects through April. So it just kind of tells you how to navigate the pages, what the information is, and you just click to go from that. So as mentioned, we have our current month performance, which is similar to what you guys normally see in the topper, and then we have a little bit of historical trends, and then these are the mode pages. So you can go to each one of the modes. So we're gonna kind of walk through, pretty much demo each of the sections today. Okay, so this is the current month performance. So it will automatically default to the last completed month. So this is April. So at the top here, we have each of our modes on cards. So we have the total boardings in the center, and then at the bottom, we have last year. So what this is doing a comparison against the same time frame last year. So this is looking at April of 2025 compared to April of 2026. The tickers indicate if ridership has went up or down. In the center here, we have a bar chart that will be running month over month, so you guys can see how ridership is performing system-wide. And if you scroll over, so if you hover over, it will give you the full context of the numbers. You can also do focus mode, so if you hit this little button, the chart will go up so you can see kind of more granular into the report. Then we have the on-time performance by mode over here, so we'll have each of the modes, what their current on-time performance is compared to last fiscal year. And the detailed table at the bottom, this is similar to what was made up of the PDF that was in the board packet. So it had the boardings by the modes, the average weekdays, average weekends, and boardings per revenue hour. So this will automatically default to the last completed month, but if you would like to go back and look at a different month, you can use the slicers at the top. So if we want to go back and look at February, it's dynamic. So all of the numbers will automatically adjust backwards to just reflect February's numbers. So that is the current month page. So we'll move on to, and this is the page navigation over here to the left. So if you hover over, it will kind of tell you, this is the sprinter page, coaster, etc. You also can use this as the page navigation if you would like.
How far back was data backfilled into this?
So for historical data, we did the last 5 years, but it is at a high level.
I
But
imagine that's a lot of work. That's all I was thinking. Oh my gosh.
yeah, so the historical data is pretty high level. It's just kind of month over month for the modes. But for fiscal year 25 and 26, when we get into the mode details, you'll see it's a little bit more granular.
Awesome. Thank you.
So for the historical page, as mentioned, this is going to be a rolling 5-year. So we have 21 to 2025 currently. So we have this at the top. These are your slicers. So you can choose a specific year if you want, or choose a specific mode. But this our thought process here was kind of just to highlight high level, kind of what our ridership looks like month over month and year over year. So same thing, you can hit the focus mode and look at the boardings. So you can see kind of, Breeze is our top ridership number. And this does have drill down functions. So if you hit this, then you can kind of see month over month for the whole 5-year span. And you just hit this little arrow to move back up. In the center here, we have our year over year growth. So this is going to show you, compared to the last fiscal year, how the ridership has increased or decreased. So we have it system-wide as well as broken down by modes, with a note that 2021 is related to, COVID related. And then at the bottom here, this is just a month over month table by fiscal year, kind of just to see if there's any trends happening with like maybe a specific type of month. So that's why we added these insights over here. So if we're looking collectively for the last 5 years, the last completed 5 years, May actually was our overall highest. But you can see as the slicers move, so if we look at 2025, technically October was for last year. And the slicers also will work. So if you just wanted to see sprinters, it will tell you which mode is sprinter's highest month as well. So it allows you to get pretty, detailed into the information. Okay, so next I'm gonna do the mode detail pages. We're gonna take a look at 3 modes because we kind of built the rail modes the same, and then the fixed routes the same, and the demand routes. So we're gonna look at coaster today for the rail modes. So all of the mode page details, the overall structure of the page is formatted exactly the same. The only key difference is how we have summarized the trip performance at the bottom. So similar to the current month performance that we looked at, the KPIs at the top are the ones you guys are familiar with receiving in the board packets, the total boardings, the averages, the boardings per revenue hour, and on-time performance. Same thing as the earlier current performance page we looked at. We have our month-over-month trends for coaster. With a new add on the mode pages is the OTP. So if you select on-time performance, this also lets you look month over month how on-time performance has been performing for coaster. To the right here, we have our year-to-date trends. So we wanted you guys to have the ability to see how the current month is performing, but also year-to-date. So when we say year-to-date, this will be July through the current completed month. And then at the bottom, we have these matrix tables. So for the rail modes, we thought it would be best to group by time of day. So we have come up with these time groupings, basically early morning, midday, etc. So how the bottom tables work is it takes the current month boarding, so this is April's, and compares it to April of last year, while also running year-to-dates. So you can kind of see how the variances are looking for just the current month as well as year-to-date. Same thing, you can move forward or backwards with the slicers at the top. And then for the rail ones, we actually added direction. So if you would like to see how northbound looks versus south. One little caveat I will add is boardings per revenue hour. We currently have that represented as a whole number for all of our modes. So when you use the directions or any of the filters with the routes, that number will stay stagnant for right now. We're in the process of getting that more streamlined, but that right now is kind of just represents coaster for the whole month. So yeah, that's basically coaster. And then we'll take a look at breeze for the fixed. So as you'll see, all of the pages are formatted pretty much exactly the same. The bottom tables is just the big difference. And we kind of went ahead and gave each mode kind of its own color just to kind of distinguish when you're on a different page that's associated with a mode. So similar, we have the current month performance at the top. In the center, we have the monthly trends. And then the difference for the fixed routes is we added the service route performance by route. So you have the ability to look how each route is performing. So if we hit this focus mode, this opens up the full matrix table, so you can see how each of the routes are performing, compared to last year. And I will note the ones that have the blanks in them are the discontinued routes. So these are noted over here to the right and what dates they were discontinued. So you also can, for the fixed routes, you can actually select a route. So if we select 303 here, you'll notice the boardings, the on-time performance. So everything will adjust minus the boardings per revenue hour. That is the one that stays stagnant across all of our modes currently. But just allows you to get a little bit more granular into, how the routes are performing. And then the last one we'll look at is NCTT Plus. Same thing, all of these are pretty much structured exactly the same. For NCTT Plus, one thing that we did think that would be helpful was to be able to have the ability to look at the different zones. So if you select the zones button, this adjusts for this fiscal year, so you can see how San Marcos is performing versus Vista. And the table at the bottom does the same thing. So you have the zones broken out with their current performance. And similar to how we did in the the Breeze route, you can select the zones. So if we select San Marcos, the on-time performance appears just for San Marcos, the boardings adjust, and then similar for Vista. With the caveat that Vista is new this fiscal year, so there is no last year comparison running currently. I know that's a lot of information all at once, but yeah, that is my demo for today. So we're open for questions.
Great, thank you. Do you have more for the presentation, or we're done? Okay, great. I just want to make sure that I didn't prematurely move on. Thank you so much for the presentation. Before I move to board member questions or comments, could I check in to see if we have any public comments?
We do not.
Okay, great. At this time, public registration to speak on this item will end. I'll go ahead and turn to my colleagues to see if there are any questions or comments. Sure, I'll just go down the line.
I just want to say thank you, and this is incredible. I love, not just for as a board member to have all this information, but this is a critical step in transparency with everybody in the region, or anybody who wants to take a look at it. So it's fantastic, and I think it could really help us inform future decision-making, and efficiencies as well. So just thank you so much. It's incredible.
Thanks.
Great work.
Thank you.
Ditto.
Board member Joyce?
I was just gonna say thanks. Now I have plans this Friday night. If anyone wants to get together, brews and reports, no, this is exciting, and I agree. Like being able to point people to the website and sit down and go through it in a very, it's very self-explanatory. I think it's very user-friendly, and it's still very detailed too, which is like, that's as good as it gets. So thank you.
Thank you. Board member Garcia? Board member O'Hara?
Fantastic, fantastic presentation. I'm going to take a little longer than everybody else, I think. But I love the public dashboard. I love the usefulness of it. I love that the software designer made this for all the varying levels of tech savviness. You can get the basic critical information at the top. You can dive down into it, and it feels like you can back out of it really easily.
And I just want to note that the software designer is Courtney.
Okay.
I'm not a software designer,
Great
but
job.
I did make this.
Great. Well, you can tell you thought of how you would use it to actively explore this information and not get lost. I know it's a lot of challenges for a lot of people is how to deep dive into it. The important information seems loaded at the top. And if you want to dive down deeper, you just roll down the page and work your way through it. And I think it's fantastic. Do we have plans to use this information or this, and I think probably not because of in this regard, this template to move things forward? I think it was mentioned possibly getting reports that we can all get some more information and share things on the same page. Is this something that this will be used for?
Yeah, so we are intending to replace the monthly topper reports in the board agenda with this. So the board already has the information. The topper has been a 2-month lag, so this will actually be an improvement on the information that we can give to the board.
Super.
Yeah, I would also note internally, we have something very similar for our procurement process. So that team, before they worked on this, actually did a really good job of building a program that pulls all of our contracts into this. And so we have almost a live dashboard of how much money we're spending through capital projects, how much, like anytime we do something in the finance department, it uploads into the background for that program. It tells us where we're at on our spend on contracts. It tells us where we're at, when contracts are going to expire, what the not to exceed amount is over the lifetime of a contract. So it's just really changed the game. I mean, our BI team has done just a phenomenal job, and all of this was done in-house. We don't have any consultants that have helped us with this. They built this from the inside out.
That's amazing. I do have one. Oh, go
The other
ahead.
thing I'll note is the BI team is Courtney and Claudia. So it's 2 people, and they've done a tremendous job.
I do have one question that I would have liked to have seen in this presentation. And what does that look like when I'm on my phone? because I think we're building something for our customers when they're on the trains and they're trying, this is going to be prompted most likely when they're using the services to use, and they're going to have their phone or a smaller tablet to. I would have loved to have just kind of seen that in this report. But I'm really excited. I wish Encinitas had a dashboard this nice. I think you did a terrific job. Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess just to point out, you can look at this on the phone. You do have to do a little bit of scrolling, but we do have plans to make a mobile version.
I figured
Showing it, sorry.
I guess what I want to see in the presentation is a lot of times when you go from this really amazing dashboard on a desktop, it doesn't always translate. And you've experienced this everywhere else. But I think this has obviously the capability and the ease of usage. I would just love to see what that looks like in the presentation. That's all. Again, fantastic job. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
I'll just say great transparency. Thanks for this.
Vice Chair Sinella?
Yeah, great work, and if you haven't already done so, you probably want to update your skill sets on your resumes.
I have a couple of questions and then definitely have comments. Wanted to know for the dashboard if the data is being automatically updated or if it's something that you then have to go in the back end and update based on the ridership data that we're collecting.
No, so it is automated.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a database engineer in IT who brings all of our data into our database, and we're actually collecting data from about 4 different systems that collectively comes into here between our ridership and our on-time performance and our para data. So we bring all of the data in here, it's refreshed, and then the information is uploaded. The only thing we're really doing is kind of just validation checks.
Got it.
And we've done a lot of validation checks prior to.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a lot. And then the other piece was around the matrix that you talked about for one of, I think it was under the Breeze operations and the data where we could look at it more granularly. Curious if that's being contemplated to be able to see with the others, or if that is a possibility with the other modes of writing, or is it just specifically for this, for Breeze?
Are you meaning for the rail modes?
Yes, correct.
There is.
Okay.
From a granular perspective on Breeze, it's a little more labor intensive because when we have a back office program that sort of tells us where we have A-lightings and boardings, that's a little difficult to sort of manage in real time into this program because it changes frequently. On the rail side, I think what we'd like to get to, and we're pushing forward with projects to bring in new automated people counters on both sides of Sprinter and Coaster. And what that will do is give us more granular data on where people are getting on and off the system. Right now, we have a pretty good idea of that when we do manual counts or fare checks, but in real time, that's probably some of the things that will be added to the dashboard as we start to upgrade some of our technology.
Okay, great. And then will there be some sort of legend to let folks know? I know you mentioned year to date is the fiscal year. Most folks, I'm guessing, think of year to date in a calendar year. So just curious if we would put something that notifies folks in that particular regard.
Yeah, I can add something on here, basically at the top of each of the pages to kind of, distinguish July to. Yeah. Yep.
That would be great. Yeah, I think I think if somebody even sees fiscal year, they may not know. Also, we're just steeped in it, so we know that. So I think the saying what it means, July to June, would be great. Yeah, and fiscal years do vary. Yes, totally. So perfect. No, and thank you. This was such an awesome presentation. This must have been such a huge undertaking, so really appreciate it. I know that being a data person, this is a lot, and I'm sure even the coding was a lot to have to figure out how to do all of that. So thank you to you and your team for all of the work that you all did. And I'm excited to see it roll out and for folks to utilize it and see, the amazing transparency the agency is providing. So thank you. And I know this is informational and there's no vote, so thank you again for the presentation.
Thank you.
All right. So our next informational item is going to be the fiscal year 27 operating budget and fiscal year 27-31 capital improvement program. Ian Park Lynch, our Chief Financial Officer, will present this item, so I'll go ahead and pass it off to her.
Great presentation, Courtney. So now we go from the positive news to the hard news. Good afternoon, board members. I will be presenting an update on the development of the fiscal year 2027 operating budget, as well as the 2027 through 2031 capital improvement program. After receiving board member feedback, we will present the final proposed budget to the board on June 18 for adoption. So before we get started, I want to provide some background on some of the activities that have preceded the development of the budget. On December 18, the board approved the initial capital program for fiscal year 2027 through 2031. Since then, for the last 4 months, staff has been evaluating project readiness. We have been looking at new capital priorities that have come up, and we have been reprogramming some of the project savings to those existing projects. So the final list of projects that will be proposed for the next fiscal year is an attachment 12C, and I think our project manager delivery office did a great job of putting a list of all those projects in a packet, so you can kind of see what is the scope and of all those projects, the cost, plus a lot of details. Then on March 19, the Marketing, Planning, and Service Development Committee also received an overview of the 2027 Service Implementation Plan. And within that plan, there are no service expansions planned for the next 5 years due to fiscal constraints. Earlier today, staff also presented the proposed budget to the Performance Administration and Finance Committee. And then here we are today presenting the proposed budget as well to the board. As a quick recap, a reminder of the board policies that guide the development of our budget. Those are board policy number 3 and number 17. Board policy number 17 requires that NCTD adopt a balanced budget. That means that operating revenues have to equal or exceed expenses. Thus, we cannot have an operating deficit. It also requires that funding be used first to cover operating needs, and any funds that are remaining can be used for the capital program. If there are any one-time revenues, those revenues must be used for either one-time expenditures or for capital investments. So in the next few slides, I will provide some of the outlook, some of the main points of outlook for the next 5 years. Uncertain funding projections at all levels of government, decreasing sales tax revenues, increasing cost, and unfunded federal and state mandates pose significant challenges for the district in the next 5 years. The revenue estimates for TDA and Transnet, which is a large portion of our operating budget, and they are derived from sales tax revenues. Those estimates are provided by SANDAG. For the next coming fiscal year, the projection is a growth of 1.3% on those revenues. And for the years subsequent to that, from 28 through 31, the average growth is 2.2%. As you can see, the revenue growth is not sufficient to cover the escalating costs that we are facing, not just in CTD, but across the country. The average, the San CPI, which is known as inflation, was 3.8% in 2025. More recently, in April of 2026, inflation is at 3.5%. So as you can see, the growth on costs and prices are outpacing the growth of revenues. In addition, the recent conflict in Iran that started at the end of February have caused oil prices to skyrocket. The cost of diesel and gasoline was higher by 74% in April of 2026 compared to 1 year ago in April of 2025. The impact on the fuel budget for NCTD related to the increase of diesel is $2.3 million to fuel our Sprinter and Coaster service. NCTD also continues experiencing higher costs on vehicles and vehicle parts that have been caused by tariffs. Tariffs affecting passenger vehicles, auto parts, steel, aluminum were enacted under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, and the most recent US Supreme Court ruling did not address these measures, and the ruling has no effect on the cost of vehicle parts and vehicles. Property and liability insurance premiums continue exceeding inflation. NCTD's safety record and zero loss history is not factored in the premiums, which are largely driven by global catastrophic events. Furthermore, federal mandatory excess liability insurance is anticipated to be in excess of $400 million in the current year from the current $323 million. According to an article by Risk and Insurance that was published in August of 2025, public transit systems liability costs are escalating at 9% annually. I don't think it's working.
We're just.
Test.
working
Test,
there? Oh,
test.
there we go. Okay. Maybe try it now. Not working? Okay.
Are working.
Testing.
Hello?
Let's have 5 minutes to figure out
now.
our microphones. Is it back?
Sound is back?
Okay, never mind. We are not taking a brief recess. Our microphones are back. There we go.
So also for the next several years, NCTD must rely on sustainable funding sources to support operations, as further state and federal assistance are not anticipated. The only time the federal government provided operating funds to NCTD was during the COVID pandemic, and those funds were fully expended by the fiscal year 2025. Continuous unfunded federal and state mandates continue placing strain on NCTD's operating budget. Some examples of unfunded mandates that include in the budget include, and these are costs that are incurred annually, and they are recurring for every year. The excess railroad liability insurance comes at a cost of $7 million a year, and that is $1.5 million in 2027 compared to 2026. Positive train control operating costs total $2.2 million. The hydrogen fuel for the zero emission transition for a bus fleet for 35 buses, which only makes up 25% of a fleet, comes at a cost of $1.7 million. Stormwater mitigation costs total $700,000 a year. Additional costs for capital investments that are needed to transition our bus and rail fleet to zero emission are estimated to be in excess of $500 million, for which currently there is no guaranteed federal or state funding. So the numbers that I just listed above are only for operating costs, as currently there is no funding guaranteed for capital transition to rail or bus zero emission. So some of the major assumptions that you will see shortly in the summary table of our budget are revenues and expenses. From the revenue standpoint, the major sources of revenue for the district comes from sales taxes, from TD and Transnet. Those estimates are largely provided by Sandak economists. Revenue estimates for state transit assistance and state of good repair projects and state of good repair are provided by the State Controller's Office. The revenue allocation to NCTD is based on population estimates for the region, for which NCTD gets 29%. The revenues for Federal Transit Administration, those are appropriated by Congress. However, funding from the Federal Transit Administration is restricted for maintenance costs or for capital investments. FTA funding cannot be used for operations such as operator wages, fuel, utilities, insurance, etc. During 2027, NCTD will be utilizing some operating carryovers from 2023 under SB 125 TRCP funding that was a one-time revenue source from the state. Those funds were provided to transit agencies across California in order to avoid what was known as the fiscal cliff. Fare revenues are projected based on ridership projections, and we do not, currently in our budget, we did not account for any future changes or fare increases, given that those changes will probably not take into effect until sometime this fall. and we still have no data to quantify the impact on ridership on those fares. The budget for fuel also assumes that for the entire year, oil prices will remain at $110 to $120 per barrel of oil. In order to balance the budget, and given the 6 collective bargaining agreements that were negotiated in 2026, we are implementing a hiring freeze of 22 FTEs, which means that 22 FTEs are not funded in the current budget. From a service standpoint, we are not planning any service expansions in the next 5 years, given the lack of funding. The NCT Plus for the Fallbrook and Palace Zone is going to be deferred until 2028 and is contingent upon receiving funding from SANDAX, Flexible Fleet Program. Any additional NCT zones will be based on funding. Funding for the Youth Opportunity Pass, those dollars are currently going to be capital dollars. The last time that SANDA provided operating dollars for the program was over 2 years ago. The funding that we're getting from SANDA is CMAQ, which is Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement Program. Those can only be used for a narrow scope of projects that meet the program guidelines. Any questions related to a service plan will be answered by Yoni Chalakova, who is the Director of Planning, and she's here today to answer those questions. So this table summarizes our proposed budget for the next coming fiscal year. We were able to achieve a balanced budget of $181 million, which is 1.17% where we were in our budget for last year. I do want to note that considering the higher costs in the current environment, inflation rate over 3%, a 1.17% increase in our budget is really a contraction. If we were to make those $180 million, $2026 in $2027, it will be higher than what we're currently proposing. The major drivers on our budget from the cost standpoint are wages, fuel, and liability insurance for those reasons that I explained previously. Our capital program for the next 2 years total $57 million, of which $49 million are programmed for 2027. Of that amount, $17 million comes from discretionary grants. Those are grants for which NCD applied for, and they're going to be used for the replacement of CNG buses, as well for a small amount for a PTC wireless project. Also, in order to be able to fund our capital needs, we will be using prior year carryovers from capital of $15.6 million. If there's any questions on our capital program, we have staff here at the board meeting to answer those questions. So in this slide, we are presenting the 5-year forecast for the next 5 years. The forecast assumes revenue based on SANDAX estimates for TDA and Transnet, assumes that state transit assistance will remain the same for the next 5 years. Revenue projections for fares are based on ridership projections. And for the cost standpoint, we are assuming that payroll growth will be at 2% and other costs will be at a growth of 3%. With that said, the projection is based on our current proposed budget, which also means that oil prices will remain high, as well that those 22 FTEs will remain frozen for the next 5 years. So this is just a projection based as a snapshot of where we are today. Every year changes slightly based on our operating budget. However, compared to what we presented last year, as you can see, the capital deficit will start in 2028, and the operating deficit is estimated that it will start in 2029. I also want to point out that the projections are based on capital investments of only $15 million a year, but that does not reflect what we currently spend on capital investments. Just during the last 5 years, our capital costs have ranged between $45 and $82 million, and this year alone, we have already spent $36 million through April. Payments for the NCTD Sprinter debt and the unfunded pension liability are not included in the operating budget, as these are not operating expenses. However, they are paid down of debt, which means that there is net cash flows from the district to pay these obligations. For next steps, by May 31st, NCD will publish the notice for the public to notify that the board will hold a public hearing on June 18 for public adoption. By June 3rd, we will release a full document for public review and comment. And on June 18, staff will come back to the board for approval of our next year's operating budget. So that concludes my presentation, and I am available for any questions.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Before I turn to board member questions and comments, do we have any public comments to speak on this item?
No one in person today, but we did receive 2 public comments via email, and those were sent to the board and put on the website.
Great, thank you. At this time, public registration to speak on this item will end. Just to preface this conversation for folks, we did have the Performance Administration and Finance Committee meeting that actually ended just right before this meeting. Yeah, and so just wanted to let you all know that we did have a robust conversation and discussion there. I'm sure some of us will ask some of those same questions if we would like. I just wanted to remind you all, you can definitely do that. I know that Vice Chair Sanella does have to leave in a few minutes, so I'm actually going to start this way with questions, if that's okay, and then we'll go down the line. So,
Well, thank you, Chair. And Yoon, thank you again for the presentation. It was even better the second time. And as the chair mentioned, we did have a robust, probably 2-hour discussion about this matter. And as I know that all of my colleagues probably agree, it's very serious. And I wanted to thank again our staff and our leadership here at the district, because your transparency to not just the board, but to the public about kind of the headwinds that we face as an agency. These aren't new. From the day that I've come onto this board about 2 years ago, I've kind of heard this theme, and it's become pretty evident to me very quickly that we're going to have to probably evolve the agency that's to some extent at some point, because these numbers are just kind of they're trending in the wrong way. And I think during our recent fare increase conversation, I actually made the comment that all tracks seem like they're heading in the same direction, and it's not a good direction, unfortunately. And I say this to my colleagues more than the staff, but I say this because I care, and I know what we do here is very important. But these numbers are daunting, and if we, the board, don't take the right approach over the next year or two, we're going to be having the same conversation and asking ourselves, why did we not do something to prevent us from getting to the point where we have these multi-million-dollar deficits? And what that looks like, I think we can have a long conversation about that, but we need to start giving staff, the leadership within this agency, some guidance on and some help, and we need to help them help us, and so we can keep doing what we're doing. And I'll leave it at that, kind of at a high level. I know that there's been, like I said, we talked about this for 2 hours, but these numbers are pretty daunting. Thanks again.
yeah, of course. If I may, I might respond again, just like I did at the last meeting, and then I will continue to go down the line. Just wanted to reemphasize, since I've been on this board since 2019, I do feel, regardless of who is in this chair's seat, that we've always worked hand in hand with staff to make sure that we are providing the utmost level of service to North County. I know all of us are committed to North County and that we want to do what's best for our residents. And so I just want to say that, I do think that the board, hopefully regardless of who's been up here, has prioritized our residents and the services to our residents. I think one of the things that I've noticed over the years is that you all have always continued to look internally to see how you can reduce, anything in terms of just moving the different pieces to really be able to continue to provide the services that are necessary. And then, of course, the last resort is that service reduction, because we want to make sure that we are providing reliable public transit to folks. That's what this agency exists for. And so, yes, totally agree that we have to continue to have really tough discussions that I think most agencies are having, and those are because of all the different variables that are being put on us as local agencies, as transit agencies, as regional planning agencies, whatever that might be, based on what's happening in the political climate federally and and elsewhere. And so, of course, we are in charge of our own destiny to a certain extent, and we will do what we can in that particular regard to make sure that we continue to do the work as we are, voted in by the voters. So we have to make sure that we continue to be good stewards of that taxpayer money. But I just wanted to make sure that I think we all do a great job making sure we work effectively together, and I know we will continue to do that and work alongside staff. So I really appreciate the dialogue, and I want to make sure. Yeah, I know you have to go, and I'm sure you want to respond.
No, not a response to that. I do appreciate the comments. I forgot that I had also brought something up during the PAF meeting that I'm very passionate about, and that's the 22 positions that are not going to be filled. These are not positions that exist today that are going away, but they're 22 positions that are not going to be filled. And we did have a conversation, and Sean was nice enough to chime in about how that might impact the services, right? That's 22 people positions that are not going to be filled. So there's going to be an impact on day-to-day services, but there's also potentially could be an impact on the existing staff morale and their workload, right? And getting, being overworked because folks are taking on additional duties to make up for the 22 positions that are not being filled. And part of that conversation that we had, and Sean, I don't want to speak for you if you want to chime in, but Sean ultimately admitted that that's not sustainable long-term, right? And so if you want to say more about that, but that's something I think we need to be very mindful too as a board. And and what I did ask for our leadership here is to keep us abreast on that matter. And if it becomes, a very big problem, then I'd like to have an update on that as a full board, so we could try to help in some way to alleviate that issue.
Thank you. Thanks for your comments. Anything else before I move on? Okay. All right. Are you okay? Board Member O'Hara, do you have any questions?
No, I don't think I have any questions. I really just want to compliment staff on a very thorough document and excellent presentation to everybody here at your meeting, as well as in our own one-on-ones and meeting with staff. I think you've done a really good job. We're obviously in uncertain times, and I think the quest to keep services available to people and to do that in an efficient manner is at top of mind for the staff. And it's clear in this budget that you've created that that's what we're looking to do. Essentially, we're being asked to do more with less in a lot of ways as we move forward. A moment like this makes me think about this past summer I visited Vermont, and I walked into a post office there. I know nobody goes to the post office anymore. We do stuff out of our offices, but I walked in the post office. We're there touring with my daughter, and looked up on the wall, and there was a picture of Times Square before World War I, and it was horses. And there was a picture between World War I and World War II. I don't remember the year. It was all cars, a couple of horses. I think we're in transportation in a moment of evolution and the opportunity to change and pivot and look at those pivots with the idea of keeping the tenets that I always hear in this board. How do we provide good service? How do we provide affordable service? And how do we get it done under the budget that we have? And I think we, as much as this is a stress, as a board, need to embrace this. And as a CEO, we look to you to embrace this as an opportunity to look at what we can do in the future to be at the front edge of that evolution. And, the budget is a little beyond the budget with that statement, but I think this points to the need to think that way. To Vice Chair Sinella's point, to let our employees know that we're thinking that way, and we're looking to move this forward, and we want them to come along and be part of that so that morale is there. I have confidence in what I see here, and I thank you for a great report. I'm going to yield the floor.
Thank you. Board Member Garcia?
Thank you. Very thorough presentation, thank you. And coming from a city where we have a structural deficit that's been going on for years, and even before I got elected, I'd see the presentation, say, okay, what is going to be done? And it always just became about cutting, cut. Well, it caught up with us. And now we're trying to figure out how we're going to provide services, how we're going to take care of the community. and balance the budget. To me, it's so clear that you've worked so hard to make sure that our constituents have good service. They know that Sprinter's going to be on time, although every time I write, it decides to break down. It hasn't happened lately. It hasn't happened lately. But thank you, because if you pay attention to this document, you can see the sweat, maybe even tears, and maybe some frustration in there of trying to get to a budget that continues to provide the service that our constituents need. And yeah, it becomes an issue, becomes unsustainable. And we're looking at all kinds of things, and we're thankful for what the voters have done. But I certainly would not want to see us in that situation where all of a sudden we feel the day was yesterday when we needed to take care of something. So thank you so much for working so hard to make sure that we continue providing the service that we need to and balancing this budget.
I would say that it was really a collaborative effort among all chiefs. Took us a lot of meetings, a lot of arguments, a lot of discussions, a lot of compromises to make it work. The 20 FTEs is really across the board, so every division got affected. So we all knew that what we had to do to make it work. So I want to give credit as well to leadership, for providing guidance. So it was not my budget; it's really the district's budget.
Board Member Joyce?
So how many, if there are 22 that we're not filling, how many do we have total that are unfilled right now?
On the operations side, it's always open. We probably have somewhere between 5 and 10 bus drivers at any given point in time that are open, and then we have some code compliance inspectors and Sprinter train attendants that are usually open. From an administrative perspective, it was right around, it wasn't too much more than the 22, I think about 27 or so. 5 were already in process for looking for those jobs, and about 20 to 22 were open, so we froze those for now.
Okay.
The total number administratively, I think, was a little bit under 30, but totality in the organization, just, we always have open rail and bus jobs, so it's probably somewhere in the 45 range, 50 range.
The impact was mostly on administrative staff, lesser impact on operational employees.
Thank you. Just for context, trying to get an understanding of like what that looks like on a current budget. So what was I'm sorry, this is another question I didn't prep for, but what was the fiscal year 25 actual expenditures? Because we had budgeted and everything that was on that slide, but we didn't have the actuals.
We're on track right now. $178 million was what was budgeted last year. We're on track for approximately $174 million. We historically have been somewhere between right around $5 million budget. This budget cycle is the closest we've ever been budget to actual. If you remember, a few years ago, we were right around $200 million on budget. We brought back to the board last year. It went to 185 the first year I was here in fiscal year 24, 25. Then last year we came with 178. Really, with about a 3.8% CPI, the budget probably should have increased somewhere between $6 and $7 million. And we increased it only about $3 million, about 1.17%. We year over year have continued to manage FTEs differently. When I came on board, we had somewhere between 10 and 12 executive positions. That's down to 6.
I remember all the titles that people were carrying
we were going through the titles all day, but and we really sort of tried to disseminate those back into the organization where we need them at the departmental level. But every year we've seen, with the exception of bringing bus operations on board, we've seen either a flattening or a reorganization of FTEs to have more dual roles in the organization than we have before. And really, that's a kudos to the workforce. They've been doing a fantastic job with that. That's not a sustainable model for us if we want to continue the service levels that we have. But right now for this year, we've been operating under that for a few months now, and they've done a phenomenal job. So
yeah, and on the table here, the proposed budget, it shows the budget of 178.8, and we're probably gonna end up around 174 based on the current trend. So this is the year that we have been the closest ever since I've been here to budget. Typically, we had savings $15 million a year, because obviously, you know, a lot of expenses were sometimes over budgeted, but and the budget for next year is gonna be probably pretty close as well to actuals.
Okay. I bring that up just because, and I really appreciate that frankness, because that is, in every organization I've been in, it's a very different conversation every single time. And so as that's shifting and it's getting tighter, there's less wiggle room for mistakes or for foreign wars. What if I mean, I assume there's a plan that if the oil price goes up again and continues to rise to double again, I assume like we have a set plan for what we would do mid-year to make adjustments?
So we are monitoring expenses every month. So every month we do a full close of our financials. So within 2 weeks, we can see where we are. So we can adjust pretty quickly. So we will not wait for the quarter. So we see our oil budget exceeding far more than what we forecasted. We'll have, you know, a meeting with Sean, and it may very well be that maybe some of those things or some of those expenditures that we're planning, other line items will have to be somehow more adjustments. But we'll look at it on a monthly basis.
Yeah, one of the things that and I think we talked a little bit about this, when we brought bus operations in-house, you know, we were fortunate that we had people that, and, you know, that was my background from back in the day, so I had a fairly robust understanding of what that might look like from a cost perspective. But the first 6 months of the year, we really had to flatline wages and salaries and then go back in January, and we had to reevaluate what we were going to change in the budget through the back half of the year. And we were always in that zone of probably estimating about $5 million under budget for the year. That's a combination of projects that just didn't get pushed along far enough throughout the year, some changes and things. And over the past couple of years, one of the things we've really done, and I think it's reflected in the salaries and wages line, is we brought a lot more stuff in-house, and we've removed a lot of our contractors from the equation. So we had a lot of professional service work that was being done by contractors out in the field, or things that were done, and we really brought that expertise back in-house. One of the things that we talked about earlier at the PAF meeting on the revenue side was we use someone to do our flagging for us, and they, you know, have their rate that they use. We actually elected to add 2 FTEs to the budget this year so that we can manage our own flagging along the rail line for any construction that was happening, and possibly use it as a revenue generator as well. So Tracy and her team brought that forward. The BI department that was up here earlier has given us tons of opportunities to change the way we manage some of our internal contracts with our parts. If you go over to the bus division now and look at the warehouse over there, they've actually removed all of our obsolete parts that exist over there, and they're working on our rail system right now. So everything is you know, it looks very much like the lean system that you hear about from the Toyotas of the world and some of that. And it's impressive to watch, but that's just like one piece of how we sort of have to manage what this looks like in the long run. But they've done a really great job with that.
I appreciate that. And it definitely sounds like you're looking under all the rocks. Eventually that, you know, you run out of rocks to look under. The fare change was brought up, and I think it's an important factor, again, for this board to be considering, because what they said in those conversations was when the fare changes, it is the lowest income folks that tend to fall off. And like that could have an impact that we're not aware of, especially with the folks that are getting hit the hardest by fuel increases and all the things that are happening right now to the lowest earners in our economy. So just another like flag for us to be like keeping a very close eye on as that change goes forward. And then one that I think we need to talk about, and it's probably gonna be a hard conversation, but I think we need to talk about NCTD Plus and what that looks like in our future. I know that it's been very popular in the areas that it's run out in, but you know, is that going to be an additive part of what NCTD is? Is it going to, are we going to expect the local cities to be contributing fully? I mean, for instance, Oceanside runs a similar program around the transit center, and it's not paid for, it's paid for by us and some other local contributors, but just thinking about what the spectrum of what we offer is and how much it costs. Do we know how much it costs to run those programs?
Yes, we have a very exact number on that. It's about 1.6.
1.6, but fully loaded because running the program is not just paying for the operators of the vehicles, there's also overhead administering, which we spread across all the modes. So for 2027, which includes NCD Plus for Vista and San Marcos, is $2.7 million.
Yeah.
I mean, we lost that in the fuel increase over the last few months. So I think we really need to think about the future of that, maybe having a policy as a board of what the expectation is if we're going to do those programs, especially when they're hyper-localized and not really hitting all of our systems. I just think it's a conversation we need to have as a board. And then lastly, just like this all, like what hits home is like when I was walking home from school the other day and saw a family sitting at the Breeze bus stop waiting for their bus. And like, that's the heart of what we do. That's why we're fighting to make these hard decisions. Getting folks to and from the places they have to go on the ways that we're providing is really important. So I definitely center that in that image that's like freezed in my mind right now. So I appreciate all the work that y'all do.
Yeah, I would say I really appreciate the comment about NCTD Plus. We had a robust conversation about that at the PAF committee meeting. One of the things that we looked at was the two current zones that exist, and I can say we are having conversations with both of those city management staffs about what a contribution would look like if we wanted to continue those programs or if they became in danger at some point. I think when you talk about San Marcos and Vista, there were some trade-offs when we put NCTD Plus in terms of fixed route service. So it's a little bit of, it's sort of ingrained in our service grid right now. I think any expansion of that, and we talked about Fallbrook kind of being the piece of that, where we have a route that's in Fallbrook. The point of NCTD Plus in that area was to try to connect really Pala and Fallbrook and try to connect those things together at some point in time. And that's been put on hold depending on what type of funding we may be able to secure from SANDAG. The earliest we would be able to probably implement something is fiscal year 28, so June of 27 probably. I think the thing that I'm a little bit worried about, and I mentioned this at the last meeting earlier today, was that two things. When you look at our budget, we have been balanced for 9, 10, 11. Plus, I think the last time we weren't in was 2008 or 2010 or something during the last session. I don't want to say that's a misnomer, but I would say that if we didn't have federal assistance, we would not have balanced our budget. So what we have to really get away from is this idea that like these one-time fixes are going to solve the world's problems, because what we did during that period of time is we said, well, we're going to expand service, so we're going to do these things. And now we're in a space where long-term, that's not a sustainable funding source. I give the team a lot of credit. One thing I'm worried about is that because we've been very fiscally responsible as an agency, I'm not sure where we rank in terms of the state looking at us like we are a fiscal problem when you talk about other agencies who are hundreds of millions of dollars in debt per year, or in the Bay's case, billions of dollars a year in debt. And I'm a little worried that I don't know where our voice stacks up when we go to Sacramento to say like, hey, we need $25 million a year in sustainable funding for operations to cover the gap. Because I don't know what appetite exists in North County for a tax referendum. And if that's not an option, what other options exist for us? And I think you saw it on that slide, I think unfunded mandates are a little problematic for us. From a federal level, we're really trying to shift the view where we can get our sheriff's department budget and some of our security covered by formula funding through the federal ranks. That really brings in more local dollars for us to sustain local service. So it's like the kind of the way we talked about it was there's really not one approach. We have to continue to look internally on things that we can solve. We have to manage from a rail perspective our relationships with Amtrak and the Class 1s. Being an owner of a railroad presents its own weird dynamic in and of itself when we talk about budget issues. We have to go back and look at the service that's already on the street. One of the things that Yoni and her team do a fantastic job at is we really have these sectors in our grid where we have 3 or 4 main routes that traverse along the same road before they break out and do something. Do we need to reimagine what that looks like? Should there be feeders to a main that provides people quick access along one corridor with one route, but then once you get off of that, it sort of branches off and we can sort of put more service in other places. The capital piece is a big part. SB 125 was really designed as a function to help operations. And I think under previous Sandag leadership, there was a lot of pressure for us to use money to fund capital projects. And I really appreciate Mario's leadership because he has changed the dynamic of what they're really getting back to basics. They're getting back to the core service, right? They're going to try to pay off debt service and they're going to try to get back to core services. And to me, that's what they really should be doing, right? Like we have to think about what we're trying to do from a capital perspective, because on SB 125, we got a little over $100 million. 70 million of that was tied up in local match to capital projects. Like if we had $100 million in operating money from SB 125, we wouldn't have an operating deficit until probably 2031 or 2032. And to me, that was a little bit of a misstep. Now, when we got that money, times were different. The forecast looked a lot different than it did. So I'm like, that's no fault of anyone. It's just, you always have to start, and this is me, like it's not everybody, but for me, you got to start at core services. And you got to make sure core services is good for 5. And then whatever happens after that, you can work on capital projects. Like you have to take care of the services first. And I think the staff here has done a really good job of getting back to that and doing that and making sure that's a priority for us. But I'm a little concerned that when we go to Sacramento and we talk about what is our role in this, and they're going to say, well, hey, you guys have done a great job, and, keep doing what you're doing. And that's not really the message we're trying to convey, is like, thanks for being responsible. We don't get any money now? Like, what happened? And I think that's a little bit of a concern because there are other voices in Sacramento right now that are filling up the room saying, I have $1 billion deficit and I have a $250 million deficit and mine's 175. And then we go in and we go, well, ours is 8 million in 2028. And they're going to be like, please move off to the side. We got to work with somebody else. There are a lot of projects at the state level, and I mentioned one earlier that I won't mention again, but it's very difficult for me to wrap my head around the fact that we're investing $1 billion a year in projects that don't make any progress when they could be disseminated to active transportation systems, whether that's public transit, whether that's roadway, whether that's bike and pedestrian, whether that's safety. I don't know what it is, but that could really be used for systems that are active and actively moving people now. I really struggle with that. And as a transit person, it's tough for me to say that because my colleagues probably don't all feel the same about that. But that's a tough space for me to be in when I know there's money there that's not going to something that can be used immediately for the betterment of our communities. And so I struggle with that a little bit. But
Yeah, we all struggle with Sacramento a little bit. Just because you said, like, the reason I bring up NCD Plus is because I just don't know that we ever talked about whether or not it was a core service. And you said, like, we should make sure core service is done at the very best. And I just feel like we should have a holistic conversation about that service. So thank you.
Board Member Desmond?
Well, thank you. There've been a lot of detailed questions that have already been asked. I got the full confidence in you, Sean. You're going to make this happen. You're going to, you came in and we had some tough times. You made some changes and some big changes and for the better. And I think, at this point in time, yeah, there's going to be ups and downs. And I think you've got, hearing the way you're thinking about this, I agree. And we'll get through it. I got the full faith and confidence in you and Lori and the team to make this happen and do the best with what we got. We'll get out of this in the other end and then we'll all skip together and be happy. So, but I appreciate all the hard work and all the effort and what you're doing to make sure that we stay afloat. Thanks.
Thank you. Board Member Edson?
Thanks again for the presentation, part 2. or maybe, yeah. Lots of details, as was mentioned, lots of information. Not always the greatest things to hear, but certainly things that the board needs to listen to and focus on and, ask how we can help as well in helping to avoid the future deficits or to reduce the future deficits. So with that in mind, I know tariffs were mentioned, so I may ask some questions that I asked earlier. And by the way, thank you for incorporating some of our questions that were asked earlier into your presentation. So thank you for that. I'm like, okay, I don't have to ask that one. But with regard to tariffs, there was a recent Supreme Court ruling on tariffs. Does that help us at all?
It does not. The tariffs were enacted under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, and the U.S. Supreme Court ruling did not address or invalidate these measures.
Okay, and are there any, maybe this question is for you, Sean, is there anything happening within the industry, within APTA or anything like that, that is fighting for us to pursue maybe some amendments to the tariffs so that we might be able to get some money?
There's a lot of things affecting that. I think, as we mentioned earlier, 10 years ago, there was 5 or 6 providers for bus manufacturers and several rail providers. And back when I started, back in the day, there was 12, 13. So we had there was a lot of competition in the field. Currently, we have about 2.5. We have 2 mainstays and one that's kind of trying to get into the industry a little bit on a smaller bus production line. At the federal level, we are trying to figure out ways to manage parts costs, tariffs increases, and some of those things. I will say, and not that we don't want to support companies that are in America, but Buy America does put us at a disadvantage sometimes because typically the production of those or the cost of those are a little higher than they would be in other pieces of equipment that we would buy. The best example I can give you is you can get a bus in Europe for $400,000 or $500,000, and here they range from $750,000 to up to $2 million, depending on what type of a bus you get. If it's zero emission, it's likely north of $1.5 million. Plus, you have ongoing cost of what that sort of looks like. In fact, one of the things we mentioned earlier was we had some grant money available to us to purchase 1 or 2 additional electric buses, and we actually said, no, we're not going to do that. One of the themes that I think we've had, and I appreciate Yoon and her team for this, is just because we have grant money doesn't mean we have to spend grant money, because inevitably it's going to come back to some cost down the road that we probably can't handle. We recently got a grant through the FTA Administrator Molinaro, and I appreciate, the conversations I was able to have with him when he was in office. But Administrator Molinaro, when he was in the office at the time, approved for us to get a sizable grant for CNG buses. So we'll be replacing our fleet with the CNG technology that we currently have now, which is virtually zero emissions. So we're pretty happy about that. But there are a lot of things that can be done. I think it's a combination of not necessarily the cost of parts, but who has the parts now, in addition to tariffs from where they're getting the parts. So it's a twofold issue where we have to go to DC and have conversations about what are we really trying to do from an industry perspective, which is consolidate. If you're a Gillig or New Flyer and you get an order from a bus, every single transit agency has a different order. I can't remember when we had this meeting one time, they said there's like 47 different shades of gray paint that they have to keep in-house because every transit system has a different color shade of gray, right? Or they want this type of seat, or they want this type of brake mechanism, or they want this type of engine. And the industry is really trying to get that down, and they're about to publish a white book that essentially is a guide for transit agencies to piggyback off of other transit systems when they make purchases, but that the bus type or the rail type is extremely similar. So the seats you get like 2-seat options, you get like 2-window options, you get like, the paint thing may be difficult because everybody wants their buses painted or they want them painted, but the tires will be the same, this will be the same. And the idea behind that is it'll speed up production. Historically, it took 12 months to get a bus after order. Now it's upwards to 24, sometimes 2.5 years. And so cost increases are part of that too, right? If you can pretty much forecast 12 months, but for an agency that builds a $750,000 bus to forecast, 30 months from now, what that cost looks like is very difficult for them. But it's a combination of being in DC, talking about what those tariffs and those things look like, but also working with our providers to try to streamline our processes to speed up making these buses or getting these parts in-house, and sort of standardizing what the industry looks like.
And is there anything that we can, as board members, do to help by pushing on our federal elected officials or anything? I know there are often letters that come to us that we then sign and send.
Yeah, there definitely is. And I will say, for a period of time, I was the president of the National Bus Coalition, and we had a very bipartisan effort to try to streamline really FTA policies and regulations, in addition to talking with private companies about how we were purchasing these vehicles and what they looked like when they came out the door and how we were going to manage parts. I give Caltrans a lot of credit. They're one of their initiatives to try to make sure that all of the rail agencies in the state, intercity rail, have a very similar train set is brilliant. It helps us leverage parts we need. It will help us sort of manage agencies the same across the state, so we have continuity of what we're trying to do. And, I think they're on the right track with that one.
All right. So looking at slide 6, the federal and state unfunded mandates. So if I total those up, it's $11.6 million, correct?
Correct. And those are the major ones. Sometimes we have, Sean mentioned earlier about the DMV fees. Those are not included here, but these are the major fees.
Yeah, one of the ones that's not on here, which isn't a lot, it's about 30 grand a year, but, we have to have our cars' emissions checked every 2 years. CARB requires us to check our buses sometimes once every 6 months, and we pay someone to do that for us. So that's just, and 30,000 may not seem like a lot with a $181 million budget, but it begs the question as to why. It's like the 700,000 for stormwater mitigation. Like, what are we paying people to do things? Like, obviously we don't want to have a stormwater mitigation issue, and we want our vehicles to be compliant, but we're public transit. By design, we are a carbon reducer. And now we have to test, buses that honestly don't even emit emissions. We have to certify that they're not sending emissions into the atmosphere. So it's an interesting space to be in.
And I'm wondering if there isn't a possibility to talk to our state level electeds as well and get them to carry some water and create some bills that actually make sense and help people and help the transit agencies. So I'm all in for that one. Let's see. Trying to not ask the same ones twice that you've already woven in. Just looking through here, that 1.17% increase over the FY 2026 budget, bravo. I mean, I know that was pulling lots of rabbits out of hats, and it wasn't just you, it was staff, I heard that, but I just wanted to one more time weigh in on the magic that it was accomplished, so thank you so much. There was something, the SB 125 dollars that came from COVID. Those,
No, SB 125 came from the state.
okay,
The COVID money, CARES Act and ARPA, those were fully exhausted by 2025.
okay. And the SB 125 that came in 2023, is that correct? Okay, and that's the last time we received that type of funding from the state?
Correct.
Okay. And we have hydrogen fuel vehicles. I believe that we have a number of them.
35.
Okay. And how many of those are in operations today?
Currently today, we are operating none of them.
Okay. And I'm assuming the reason for that is because we can't get fuel.
We did, there is a reason for that. They had a safety incident occur at our provider. We recently, maybe not recently, but we moved from getting our hydrogen from Las Vegas to California. The fuel station in California that was providing it had an incident, and they could not provide high-pressure gas hydrogen to us. We've been down about 2.5 months, maybe 3 months. But even before that, until the liquid station comes online, we only had enough fuel to run about 15 buses a day at any given time in service. Once the liquid station comes online, we'll be able to run all 35.
Okay. I look forward to us being able to run all 35, but right now a quarter of our fleet is sitting that we can't use.
Right.
And again, an unfunded mandate where we get money for something, but then it doesn't support it. Disappointing. A couple of the things when we were talking earlier, we talked about possible ways to offset some of these expenses. So I had mentioned that LoSAN, because I sit on the LoSAN board and sat in that meeting on Monday, LoSAN has programmed $19 million for corridor I tripped over this one last time, hardening and resiliency. It's because I can't read my own notes, by the way. And so low sand program, 19 million, and 30 million's coming from Union Pacific Railroad. And UP owns part of the rails up there as well, but they also have a vested interest in making sure that their tracks are resilient and will continue to carry freight and do the job. So my question was, can we get any money out of our freight service down here?
Yeah, and the answer to that is we can. As we talked a little bit about earlier, we have a great relationship with Amtrak and our Class 1s. I would say it's a difficult situation for us to go back to the Class 1 currently and have a conversation about how much they give us because it is more than what Amtrak provides. And I would argue that, outside of the commerce aspect of the amount of revenue that's generated by the region through freight movement on the rail, there is a lot of train traffic as it exists for Amtrak. So I think when we, 20 plus years ago, when we continued to have conversations about what easement rights look like for Amtrak and the Class 1s, we maybe shorted ourselves a little bit on that one because we were looking for partnerships out of that deal. I think Amtrak's probably the first place we need to go to have a conversation. That's a little difficult because kind of like what we talked about is it's really us talking to LoSan, talking to the state, talking to Amtrak. So we've got a few layers that exist there. We've got some indemnification issues that we need to square up with them as well along the track for incidents that occur along the line and just general maintenance. We do have a really good agreement with BNSF. We try to allow them to do as many projects as possible in the corridor because they have the expertise to do it, and we pretty much get it sometimes at a little bit of a reduced rate because when it's cold somewhere else, they'll bring crews here to do work in the wintertime because it never gets cold here. So the folks really like that, and it keeps their teams sort of busy in the wintertime. But we definitely need to go back and reevaluate all of those contracts that we have with those agencies to decide whether or not they're operating not necessarily in the best interest of NCTD, but in the best interest of us as owners of the railroad, first and foremost. So that will feed into what we do as NCTD.
I think also for, Amtrak, again, with this LoSan hat on or half on, that they need to look at their riders and how much advantage it is to their riders to have our capital projects completed. And, there's a lot of double track we still need that would help a lot. And their ridership's way up, so maybe they can shake a few dollars loose.
It's extremely helpful to have, our deputy CEO sits on the National Surface Transportation Board Passenger Rail Committee. In fact, she's the secretary of that committee. That gets us into a lot of conversations with people that we normally wouldn't. Probably can't mention any names, but we talk to a lot of congressional folks about that deal with defense spending, that deal with energy spending, that are sort of outside the normal realm of public transit. And that's the other piece that we need to look at too is we're a member of STRACnet. We need to have conversations with the U.S. military about what that means for them. We move a lot of military material along the corridor, north and south. So that's all part of how we sort of approach this as an owner of the railroad approach to how we're going to generate revenue.
Well, anything that we can do to generate revenue and to reduce what's coming up is a good thing in my opinion. I'd also asked a question about whether organizations like the Padres who benefit from our service and expanded service are willing to throw anything in, especially since the Padres have new owners and they seem to have a big checkbook.
Yeah, they're on our radar to talk to.
I think that's all for me now. Thank you.
Board Member Contreras?
Yeah, I'll just jump off of the STRACnet comment. First, again, thank you, Yoon, and to the entire team and to NCTD for working with a lot of constraints and externalities that we can't control that are detrimental, not just to this agency, but to a lot of folks throughout the nation. With the STRACnet, I really do want to lean on that because being part of the Department of Defense's strategic corridor, I think that needs to come with more federal funding. I think some of the onus should be on the federal government to provide some more funding for this critically important rail corridor. And at Sandag, I was able to get board approval with almost everybody to make sure that we have StracNet in our legislative platform and whatnot. So definitely, I've always been excited, Sean, about the conversations that you've had with the federal government, also pertaining to the Sprinter corridor and potentially having that be part of this strategic network. So thank you so much for that. I do want to highlight some of the questions that I asked, and some of them were brought up. So Board Member Joyce, you talked about the price per barrel of oil, and that being a concern. Obviously, that's a huge concern. One of the things that I said during our PAF meeting right before this is that, hopefully the war with Iran is this illegal war is stopped. Sorry, that's Board Member Desmond listening to something, but so hopefully the war with Iran, the illegal war, is stopped, but it seems to be getting worse and worse. So, I know that we're being really conservative at projecting $110 to $120 per barrel of oil. I think that's a great assumption to be working on, but I have requested an emergency alert to the board once we start getting towards closer to that $120 per barrel, because we're going to have really critical conversations. And this goes to a different point that is a painful point, but with our service, just looking into the future, seeing that we're going to have deficits and potentially there's going to be deficits all over the place, just state, federal, who knows. I have requested, and hopefully the board is okay with this, that we have a list of primary routes, priority routes that we know we need to keep funded, but that we, on the flip side of that, have a list of possible service reductions and eliminations, and that we start looking at this as a board as soon as possible so that we can have a lot of our customers integrated into this conversation, have a lot of transparency for the public, and start having those conversations now. Because the sooner we can do this, it's going to be a difficult conversation, but we need to have a plan ready to go as soon as possible, especially if things get worse. So that to me is incredibly important. And I'll skip some of the other things, but the last point that I want to make is, we have our transit enforcement unit with the sheriffs has done an incredible job here. I'm really concerned because I'm seeing in my city, and I know this is true for all the contract cities, and when we talked about this in PAF, this is true for NCTD as well. Our contracts are coming up, and they're going to have to be renegotiated. And right now, we're being told that there's going to be a 25% increase, which is completely unsustainable for our jurisdictions to have to roll that into our already fractured budgets. So I really want to get together with as many of the contract cities and agencies that are going to be affected. And I think that we need to write a letter. We need to get the county board of supervisors integrated into this conversation, because a 25% increase, that's just way too high. It's more than, I think, double what we've seen historically, if not triple, depending on the year. So I would be totally on board from this agency to write a letter addressing that to the other agencies and jurisdictions that would be affected so that we could work and advocate together against that extraordinarily high cost. And I did forget about this other thing. So I want to make the point about the liability insurance premium. This being a federal mandate is really difficult because, you know, we want to buy American wherever possible, but we can't even buy our insurance here in America. We have to go overseas. And that is a huge problem for me. And it should be a huge problem for this board. I didn't know that these conversations were happening, but in looking at this budget and having internal conversations, talking at PAF publicly, I really do think that the federal government needs to pursue a national insurance for American transportation agencies so that we can pool the money together here. We can ensure that, you know, those liability costs aren't skyrocketing, and that, you know, this is something that needs to be done. So for me, I would be, again, on board with the advocacy to have a letter from the board. It sounds like there's other transportation agencies. There's already conversations happening about this. So the more pressure that we could put and the more advocacy that we can put forward about how we need a national insurance pool, I think is going to be fundamentally the right path to take, and something that we should get started on that advocacy as well. So outside of that, thank you so much. I know it was really difficult to get to a balanced budget, and it continues to be, you know, an issue looking at these projections with these deficits. So hopefully we can start having these really difficult conversations now, put our advocacy in order, and be a really strong voice for ensuring that our customers, our riders, can always be connected to the critical resources that they need every single day. Because at the end of the day, that's our mission. So thank you again. I really appreciate it. And that's all from me.
Thank you. I think Board Member Edson had one additional question.
It turned into two. Sorry. So one of the questions that I asked earlier was about the difference between non-transportation revenues and cost recovery fees. Both of them are, the non-transportation revenue is down 3.67% on the operating budget summary, slide 9, and cost recovery fees are its own slide number 11. So I think it's important to understand the difference between the two, and if there's anything that we can do about that and whatnot.
So in the line item for non-transportation revenues, it's mostly investment income. So that's funding that NCD receives for its investments in LAIF and the county investments pool. We also have in there revenues that we collect from leases, permits, and then revenues that we collect from the LCFS, which is the low carbon fuel standards and programs. So you can see that the forecast is higher than what we have budgeted because investment income is largely driven by interest rates. So from a conservative approach, we have budgeted, we will receive $1 million of investment income next year. But if interest remains high, we may receive $2 million, right? It all depends. But we need to make sure from a conservative standpoint that we're not aggressive. Because again, if we overestimate revenues, we're going to overestimate our costs, and if those revenues don't materialize, then we'll be in the negative. So that's largely driven. The same thing with the LCFS revenue. Those are related to the sales from the credits for the use of renewable natural gas. But as we consume less CNG, because we have now the hydrogen fleet, we're going to be losing those revenues. So what we do is, again, we do an estimated, conservative approach. Those credits are based on market prices. So we always say, okay, what is the most conservative estimate of what those revenues are going to be? So that's kind of why you see sometimes that the forecast or the actual comes a bit higher, which is a good thing, but we don't want to budget high because then you run a risk that those revenues don't materialize because they're not sustainable, they're uncertain. It's also driven by interest rates and market prices.
Would things like bus wraps fall under non-transportation revenue?
The advertising,
Yeah.
They do. We still do internal advertising. One of the things that we did when we went a couple years ago through our campaign to try to manage our brand differently was we walked away from some of the external wraps and advertising. Our focus was really on our brand. There's a few different reasons for that. Cities don't do that. They don't wrap police cars and fire trucks when they have revenue shortages. They maintain their brand for safety purposes. One of the things that I think public transit suffers from, and one of the things that we addressed through this was safety and security. And when our equipment is not identifiable and clean and recognizable by the public, it is not a brand that we're trying to put out there. We represent the communities that we serve. We don't represent the businesses in the communities. We've received a lot of positive feedback about that, and we also made cuts within the organization to control that. The revenue generated from that was less than 0.5% of our revenue over the course of a year. We wanted to focus that back into safety and security. We wanted a very identifiable brand for our systems. I will say in other systems, I've done that everywhere else I've been. It started because we got sued by someone who was on the side of our bus, and it wiped out all of the revenue that we ever generated from that. So the likelihood of that wonderful attorney on the side of the bus suing us was highly probable. Didn't think that was a good utilization of taxpayer dollars. So we made the applicable cuts internally to manage that revenue shift. Our goal is really to focus on things that are sustainable from a revenue perspective for us. And we still do a little bit of advertising here and there. We're very specific about who and what and where, and not externally, but internally. I think we're really more focused on things like naming rights or partnerships that we would have in the community with local universities or businesses that reflect the communities that are out there. I think we've been very conscious about the safety and security of our employees and our brand. So we've made a lot of changes to that over the past 3 years, and our marketing team has done a phenomenal job with that. So kudos to Mary and the group on that.
We do have Padres train wraps now and then, though, right?
We do not. We still partner with the Padres. We've had some conversations with the Padres about that. We always sort of keep those options open. I would rather get into a partnership with the Padres where we have a Padres presence within our community and not necessarily on our train. Our brand is everything. It's who we are. I get frustrated when I see, and it's no fault of any of our employees, but like when we have old coaster trains that are still going through the process of a refurbish, like sometimes that catches my eye. We have an absolutely beautiful fleet. Our breeze buses are phenomenal. The coaster, when it has a brand new set and it's going to a Padres game, like that's everything. It represents everything about our communities that we serve and our employees that operate those vehicles. And I will never, I just really have a hard time trying to compromise what our brand for our employees looks like. We received a ton of positive feedback from the business community when we made that decision. Our employees were very thankful for that decision as well. I've had situations in the past where employees have refused to use equipment because of the types of ads that are represented on the buses. And, as we continue to move forward with First Amendment rights, there's very few times where we can deny some type of an ad that would be put on a vehicle. And it's never worth the potential litigation that will be downline. And I always sort of take it back to, we don't need 0.5% of a revenue. I could advertise every year for 200 years and not cover 1 year's budget. I need $50 million, right? So like for me, it's about protecting not only our brand, but the brand of our community. We represent every city that we serve. Well, I represent McDonald's sometimes when I go, but in reality, our brand has to be synonymous with safety and security, cleanliness. Our brand has to represent our communities, and it has to represent every employee that steps on that equipment. And that's the first thing they see when that bus per train pulls up, and it's the last thing they see when it's pulling away. And I've just seen time after time that when you put that energy into our brand, it completely changes the way people visualize this agency. And I think Mary and Lyda and her team have been phenomenal advocates for what we're about as an agency, and it's starting to show in our statistics on incidents that occur on our buses, crime on our platform. Alex and his team are the same. The facilities group has done a phenomenal job of clearing the path at our transit centers, improving the lighting, changing our security presence out there, and it just changes the way that people feel about what they see when they walk up. And I appreciate all the businesses that would love to put something on the back of a bus, but that's our business on that bus, and we want our business to be represented.
All right, and then the sheriff, just circling a little bit back to the sheriff contract. I know that my city manager is part of the sheriff's negotiating team, the contract negotiating team, yours too. So I think that group already exists, and I don't know if it would be a good idea for staff here to get a hold of the negotiating team and try to throw in your 2 cents instead of a letter to everyone, because that may, if it's already in process, this negotiation, I think you might want to get in front of that a little more
We haven't
directly.
officially started yet. We're still working
The
through.
cities are doing it.
Yeah, I think ours is up next year.
Ours are up next year too.
And
They're all 2027.
And I think I'll echo something you said earlier. I've worked with a lot of, I've been responsible for a lot of transit police in my career. This is by far the best unit I've ever worked with. They are phenomenal.
We like our sheriffs.
Yeah, and that doesn't excuse the rising escalation of the bill, but, and I appreciate that. I know there are things in there that are legitimate that they need to sort of manage in real time, but we're going to have to go back and have a serious conversation about what that looks like overall. And we're more than happy to go in with the cities, even though we're not at that point yet. And we're more than happy to walk in. One of the things that we are thankful for their help on is reinstatement of citations along our system. We have been had a lot of internal conversations recently about what fair enforcement looks like and the ability to maintain citations back. And so we've been having a lot of conversations with the DA's office about making sure that offenders of assaults and things like that on our service are prosecuted by the DA's office. And however we can help with that in terms of providing video evidence or the reports that are needed to do that, so that we can create that safe environment. But we need the sheriff's team to help us out with that. They're really good, and we more than happy, if y'all want us to jump into your conversations with you, we're happy to do that.
Well, I think that my point was just that we also have a 2027 end to our contracts, and the negotiating is ongoing now. So I don't think you want to wait for another year, because I think it'll already be decided. Okay, I see Lori pointing to herself saying, "It's me, I'm on it." Okay, thank you, Lori.
Any other questions before I expeditiously go through mine? Okay. All right. I tried to cross out as much as was covered already. First off, thank you for the presentation. I know we already had a very robust discussion earlier, but I know not everyone must be watching that meeting, and so this is a good opportunity for us to rehash some of what was discussed. Some of the things were already covered in the presentation, so similar to like what Board Member Edson said, appreciate those aspects being included. A couple of different things that I just wanted to ask about. And as briefly as you can on the, I know you mentioned, of course, that we have the cost outpacing revenue. What do we do to plan to stabilize that as we look to our 5-year forecast? And I don't know if Mr. Donaghy or Ms. Yoon-Parkland would like to respond.
You want me to respond to that one again? We touched on it briefly earlier, but, and I'll collect my thoughts a little shorter on this one, but it's not just any one thing. I think it's a combination of exploring whatever local opportunities we have from a potential tax referendum perspective, but being thoughtful of what that means to the community. It is also paying very close attention to our relationships with our partners as a railroad owner, the Class 1s, Amtrak, how we can generate more revenue off of that. It's business partnerships for us in the community. Like when we talk about NCTD Plus, are we getting businesses involved in that conversation? Are we talking to the cities about, can they invest in what that looks like? It's also revenue generation from some of our capital projects. Are we managing capital projects the way that they really should be done? Are there some out there that we really need to reevaluate and manage differently? Some of our TOD projects that exist, are we maximizing our revenue opportunities through those? It's a combination of all of those things. So we've got a lot of different avenues to go down, and we've kind of got people all over the place sort of managing those conversations in real time.
Thank you. And I know we talked about sustainable funding sources and that particular category. You may have touched on it, but could you just share a couple of examples of what that is?
So for the most part, sustainable funding sources are formula funding. Those are funding that the district receives through legislation. So the major ones for CTD are TD and Transnet, which is from sales taxes, and the Federal Transit Administration and state transit assistance. So we call those sustainable because there's a highly degree of certainty that we'll receive the funding. The dollars may not necessarily be the same every year. Some years may be lower, or some years may be higher, but there's certainty that we'll receive those. One-time revenues like COVID funding or SB 125 is not sustainable because those are one-time funding. So what we refer by sustainable is recurring annual revenues that have a highly degree of likelihood that we will receive.
Perfect. Thank you. A couple of comments, and then I have another question on the back here. But I know we talked about not having service expansion up until from 2027 to 2031. I know that as soon as we're able, we will start to think of ways to continue to provide the necessary services in areas, and I know that we're going to be watching the data to see where we'll need to continue to provide that, but I know we always talk about wanting to provide that reliable, frequent service, and so just wanted to emphasize that piece from earlier as well. Another piece is around the conservative estimates that you provided, and I wanted to just say that we always see that shift whenever you give us that 5-year forecast, and if you could just briefly comment on you know, this is just that point in time snapshot, and then what that projection and how that projection shifts over time would be helpful.
So the forecast, the baseline of the forecast is always the current year budget. So in prior years, when you saw high budget, the forecast is going to look high because it assumes the status quo. So this year, what I indicated earlier, the reason that you see a significant contraction of our budget is because combination, right? If 22 FTEs that are frozen. So the assumptions within the 5-year assumes that that will continue over the next 5 years. All the efforts that have been done across the district to cut a cost. So the assumption is that we are going to contain the cost within that dollar level. So each year we rebaseline, as well as we also have to rebaseline our wages because the last year forecast did not factor in the new CBA agreement for the bus operators, but now that has a new rebaseline. So that's why you always see that number moving because the current year activities and the plans for the next year rebaseline the budget for the next 5 years.
Yeah, and I will say, and this is really a testament to the entire staff, we negotiated 5 collective bargaining agreement contracts and did not ask the board for an increase in the budget. And we have 3 more in the next year and a half or 2, Lori? 3, 4? And like that's almost unheard of. So, you know, we appreciate the work that was done on that by staff and by our collective bargaining partners on that.
Thank you. And I think you mentioned that the last time that there may have been that there was an operating deficit was back in 2008.
I wasn't here, but
Sure.
I could go back, but that's the year where the decision was made by the district to outsource bus operations, given the forecast of the deficit.
Okay.
I believe it was the first year of Sprinter operations, we had a deficit.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then one of the things that was talked about was around the legislative advocacy that we'd like to continue to do in order to make sure that we have flexibility in the money that's being utilized for operations. So just want to make sure that we continue to prioritize that, and then of course make sure that you're utilizing us in whatever capacity. I know you all do send us little pings here and there to make sure that we are doing that, but for this specifically, especially given what we're seeing here, I think it'll be really critical that you use us in that particular capacity, so that we can make sure we're advocating. And then the last part that I just wanted to emphasize was around, I think I asked about some graphical depictions of the data and just being able to see, how things have shifted in terms of the numbers in the past 5, 10, 15, 20 years, just so that we can see, okay, when certain things were in effect, how did that, help us, and how did that maybe shift things? So it would be helpful, and I know you said that should be something that's possible. Again, don't need that right now, but it would just be nice for us to see from like a policy
Would you like to
perspective.
see the total expenditures? Because the last few years, we had the phase transition. So rail operations and maintenance several years ago were purchase transportation. So when you see the budget, those will show high amounts of purchase transportation. But as we started insourcing rail operations, then you kind of start seeing a shift. Some of them goes to wages, and then some remain purchase transportation, because then we did the next phase, which was signals and maintenance away, and then we moved to bus operations. So we can definitely show the trend for the last 10 years based on these categories, but you'll see those
Yeah.
shifts. So
You're saying there are clearly other
Moving- correct, moves
conditions
within the
associated with
lines,
it. Yeah,
correct.
yeah.
Well, I think the overall number,
but the overall number,
I
yes.
think the overall number of like how much we're paying to provide service,
Yeah.
how much it's costing us in capital, that trend, I think would be
Correct.
very important to the board to see.
Correct, definitely, we can provide that.
Perfect. Well, and I want to say thank you. I think since I've been here, clearly since 2008, we've been able to have, not operate in a deficit. And then also since you've been here, we've had a balanced budget. And I just want to say thank you. I know you have to show us like, hey, in this day, in this time, in this day, if we were to continue to operate the way that we are with all of the other factors that we have, this is what it would look like. But I think a couple of folks already mentioned we have full faith in your abilities, but at the same time, please, let us know what we can do to make sure that we're continuing to advocate with regards to funding from like federal and state partners. So other than that, if there are no other questions or comments, thank you so much for the presentation. And then I think we'll be moving on to closed session. And that'll be Ms. Winfrey, our Deputy CEO and Chief General Counsel, who will take us into closed session. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have two items today. The first one is pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, subsection D1, regarding existing litigation in the matter of Rollins versus North County Transit District. The second item is pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, subsection D2, anticipated litigation related to a government claim that was received by the agency.
Great, thank you. Ms. Winfrey, can you please bring us back from closed session?
Yes, the board met in closed session to discuss the two matters noted previously, and there's no reportable action.
Okay, I think there's just one thing that our CEO would like to share. I know most of us have left, but hopefully, or not most, but yes, go ahead.
So the lone employee that stayed with us is Bridget over there. It is with great pleasure and pride that I tell you that for the first time in the agency's 50-year history, we received an Industry Gold Award for bus safety for the transition. I can tell you, having been around for a hot minute, that these are very difficult to get. They only give out 3 per year for bus and 3 per year for rail, and they're in ridership categories. So essentially small system and then mid-size, which is what we are, and then large city systems. And so to be one, and the category that we're in is the largest category of transit systems in the United States. So to be able to get this award for all the work that was done during the transition is phenomenal. We were summoned to Salt Lake City Tuesday to jump on stage and pick this up. It was, I've been fortunate to get a few of these before. They are, I never miss an opportunity to thank the staff for the work they do when we get these. But this is a big deal for the agency because it speaks volumes of how amazing our employees are and what a great job they do. And I don't think this is the last one we're going to get. I think we're going to get some more, hopefully on the rail side. So we'll see how that goes. But thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I have today.
Thank you. Yeah, very exciting. Thank you. Board members, do you have anything to report out? Yes, okay. Why don't you go ahead and then
Yeah,
we'll
no, I just want to tell everybody, if you haven't noticed, it's Bike Anywhere Day, and I have been biking all over North County today and had a lovely rest from biking when I put my bike on the Sprinter, and I gotta say, there is a lot of bikes on the Sprinter today. So at one point, there were 5 bicycles and 2 folks in power chairs, meaning there was not a lot of space. But that's all I have to say. Yeah, thanks.
Board Member Garcia.
Thank you. All I want to share is a very positive story. I had a group of about 35 kids and some adults that took a ride on the coaster from Oceanside to Old Town. And the majority of both the children and the adults had never been on a train. And this was exciting for them and new, and they were looking, and what Sean did to make them feel welcome and your staff was incredible. They still talk about it. So I just want to say thank you for your dedication. Thank you for caring for our communities, our disadvantaged communities, and thank you for inspiring the next generation of riders, right? Because now all of a sudden they're not afraid to get on the trains and light rail and stuff. It's like, oh, wow. So thank you, my friend. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. All righty. Suhail, do we have any remaining public comments today?
We do not.
All right. At this time, public registration to speak on remaining public communications will end. The next scheduled meetings are Marketing, Service Planning, and Business Development Committee meeting Thursday, June 18th at 11 a.m. And then the regular board meeting also on Thursday, June 18th at 2 p.m. And we are adjourned at 4:49.